Okay, so how's this for reality in podcasting? I'm getting ready for this episode, and one of my dogs, I've got 3. Buster, the little rescue dog, he starts going, you know, that thing that they do right before they're going to puke all over the place. And we have some pretty nice carpet in the studio, and so I'm trying to figure out, all right, how do I pick up the dog and move him somewhere else? There's carpet everywhere. And so I thought quickly, I ripped off a sheet of paper, 8x11, put it down in front of the dog. He puked right on the paper. Awesome. Yes. So then I start trying to pick up the paper, and it's starting to soak through, and it's starting to try to run off, and, you know, that whole thing. And so I get it into the trash can. I'm like, yes, I saved the carpet. He starts doing it again. And because I'm over by the trash can, I can't get to another piece of paper quick enough. Puked on the carpet a second time. Sometimes life just hands you lemons, and you gotta just smile. I cleaned it up, gave him a hug. So send some of your thoughts out for my sick little dog today in our hopes that he feels better. I have a true story for you guys today. Stand by.
Welcome to the Turbocharged Entrepreneur, where we discover the secrets of mastering the mind game of success. Clear your mind's calendar. You're about to be infused with some high-octane wisdom that is going to help you turbocharge your positivity, your creativity, your productivity, and your profitability. Here now is your host, a former executive with the Fortune Global 100, a successful entrepreneur out of Georgia Tech's Advanced Technologies Development Center, an advisor in the Charlotte startup community, and your friend in going over, around, or straight through obstacles, Sean Webb.
Hey, welcome to the Turbocharged Entrepreneur, where we increase your positivity, creativity, productivity, and profitability by getting you into the mind game of business. I really appreciate the time that you're spending with me today, and I respect that time, so we're going to get right into the story. I used to be a sales rep before I moved into sales management and then executive management, and during my number of years in sales, I learned to be a good sales rep. I was one of the top reps in each organization that I worked for, and when that happens, there's a motivation to do so, because when you make President's Club, they fly you to places like Cancun for a week and Grand Cayman for a week and skiing in the mountains for a week and a bunch of these President's Club award trips that are, you know, would be thousands of dollars out of your pocket if they weren't paying for it and flipping the bill. One of the best stories that I have from those days is a situation where I was really behind the 8 ball. And it was with a sales client who was a multi-billion-dollar organization. I was dealing with the president of a major division, and I knew some of the engineers within the organization, and I had them all flipped to want to go with us versus a competitor that they were ready to sign a contract with, that the president of the division was ready to sign a contract with. Now, they would schedule a contract signing on a Wednesday at 2 o'clock. And I scheduled a meeting. I said, look, give me 1 hour before you go out there. And we'll schedule it at 12. And you can come in. And if we don't convince you, go out and sign the contract with the competitor and no harm done. So they agreed. They said, yeah, okay, we'll come by. And so at 12 o'clock, they showed up. They had 5 people in their group. I brought into our boardroom 6 people so that any question that they had within that hour would be answered. But I prepped everyone beforehand. I knew that before we could ultimately get any type of a yes at all from this president of this division, we had to start with a yes at the beginning of the meeting. And so I told my team, I said, look, guys, there's something that's called a golden silence. And they call it the golden silence because the person who remains silent gets the gold. Meaning, I'm going to ask a question, and the first person who speaks after that loses. If you speak and you lose this for me, I will kill you. So everybody was prepped going into the room not to say anything and be totally quiet for me to take the lead and to ask this tough question that I was going to pose to this executive. Now, on the whiteboard, I wrote this message to set the tone for the meeting. It was a Danish proverb. It said, no matter how far you've traveled down the wrong road, turn back. So the president of this organization, his name's Jim, he comes in and he smirks at this proverb because, you know, he knows that I'm trying to pull this Hail Mary pass out at the last hour right before they go out and they sign this deal with the competitors, and understand how far down the road they are with these competitors. They are they've taken their entire sales team of 20 folks out to this facility, toured the facility. These are this major telecoms battling each other type of thing. They've already started a process in-house to do a transition with, servers and stuff like that. And so they're taking steps, and they're just going out to sign the contract now. And so I started with this question after everybody sat down and all the niceties were taken care of. I said, Jim, before we start, I just wanted to ensure that, before we take the time here, that if we show you that we're better for your organization than the competitor, that you're gonna be able to say yes and go with us. And this guy is no fool. So he's very astute, understands what the question means, and he goes, well, let's see what you got. So he didn't give me a yes, which is a very smart move on his part. But I knew that I needed to get that yes to get the ball rolling on a number of yeses to ultimately get to the contract where I said, I can get a yes for doing business with us. And so I stopped and I thought for a second. I had to think quickly, and I said, well, Jim, I appreciate that. You want to see what we've got, but before we got 12 people in the room here, and before we waste everybody's time for an hour, I understand that you guys have gone out and taken a tour, and you're already starting this process, and yada yada yada. And I said, if it's just the way it is, and the situation is as it is, I understand that just thing kind of happens, kind of relieving the pressure a little bit because I'm about to reintroduce this question. I said, but I need to know before we take everybody down this road and burn an hour of everybody's time that, you're going to be able to tell your entire team that you're not going with the competitor and that you're going with us instead, and turn everybody 180 degrees if we show you that we are the best fit for your organization and we offer the best services for your organization. And that was where the golden silence started. And he sat there for a good 30 to 45 seconds. And if you've ever been in a room with 12 people where there is a good 30 to 45 seconds of silence, there is a high amount of tension in the room. And he waited for someone else to break the silence. He thought one of my folks would crack, I believe. None of his folks could answer because I asked a question of the top guy directly to the top guy, and so none of those guys could answer because they'd be breaking ranks. I told my people not to answer. So, and even though, they told me afterwards, one of the engineers and one of the sales support staff said, oh my God, I so wanted to say something. But they were told not to say anything, and so no one said anything. And I wasn't going to say anything. So Jim and I stared at each other for a good 30 to 45 seconds. I was waiting for an answer to my question, and Jim didn't want to answer the question. But finally, in a lowered tone even, he said, yes. And you could see he was not happy about answering the question. He was boiling a little bit, but I gave him a no-win situation. If he were to say no, then he would be admitting that he doesn't really have power over his organization. So he almost had to say yes. Whether or not he could stop the process or not, he had to say yes. Now, how is that yes powerful? Well, because in his mind, if he's too far down the road, and he believes he's too far down the road, and he's got everybody moving in one direction, he has now opened the door inside his own mind to say, yes, I have the power to tell everybody to turn around, do a 180, and we're going to go with these guys instead. And that was critical. That was critical for everybody in the room. That was critical for, of course, our side, but that was especially critical inside his own head to get that admission to say, okay, yes, I can go with you guys if you prove to me that you're better than the competitors. And so we started the presentation. Everybody on my team was spot on. Everybody on his team and the engineers that all wanted to go with this anyway kind of hammered on him the whole time, supporting what we were giving them. And at the end of 3 hours, they blew through their contract signing time with the competitor. 3 hours and 10 minutes in, he took a deep breath and sighed after one of the last points that we've made, explaining us versus the competitor. And we'll go through some really cool stuff about sales and how to sell versus competition and stuff like that in the future. But he finally sighed. He just let it out, and his body just kind of released the stress. And it was at that point that I knew we had him. And 15 minutes later of details later, we printed out the contract and he signed it before they even left. And the competitor was furious. They had just lost a $1.2 million deal over the next year, 3.6 over the 3 years of the contract, and they were not pleased at all. But we got it done. And the reason that we got it done, the only thing that allowed us to get that done, and the reason that I tell this story is that there was a tough question that needed to be asked in the beginning. And there's always a tough question in every sales or support or service or product situation that needs to be asked. And so as professionals, as business professionals, we need to have the intestinal fortitude to ask that tough question. Now, here's the thing that stands in front of us asking those tough questions. And here's the reason that my systems engineer and the sales support person wanted to say something in the meeting when I put out that golden silence question. It's called sense of self, or sometimes called ego, but it is the propensity for us to want to be liked by other people. Okay, which is great. I mean, it's awesome to be liked by other people. But if it's a requirement for you in business to be liked, if you need it for your self-value, for your self-esteem, if you need to be liked, then that's a hindrance in business. Because the reality is there are times where you don't necessarily need to be an asshole, but at the same time, you need to be able to ask the tough questions that people are not going to like you for asking. Right? That uncomfortable silence that you're creating. The people don't like that. Jim, the president of the division, did not like the fact that I reintroduced a question that he thought he had successfully deflected, and then I sat there in silence. He didn't like that at all. You could see the anger level just rising in him slowly until he finally backed down a little and then, said yes to the question. He didn't like me. We got along great after we signed the contract. We had a great relationship moving forward. I got like a number of follow-up contracts from him later. He liked me after the fact, and we had an awesome relationship. We even went golfing from time to time. But at that moment, at that fork in the road, he didn't like me at all. And I had to dig myself out of that first 30 minutes of ire into a place where he kind of liked me and then did like me at the end of the meeting. And did believe that we were going to be better for his organization and make his life easier, right? Because that's one of the pitches that I made for him in the meeting as well. But ultimately, he didn't like me. If I had this in my way, if I needed Jim to like me, he would have loved me. He would have slapped me on the back as he's walking out the door to sign the competitor's contract. But I would have been liked. It would have been awesome. I wouldn't have put him in a difficult situation at any point to force him into making a decision because I wanted him to like me. Right? But that's not what's effective in business. What is effective in business is being able to ask that tough question of your client, being able to ask that tough question of your engineer, being able to ask the tough question of yourself from time to time, right? Because if you're not being as productive as you need to be, for instance, and you need to ask yourself that tough question, self, what am I going to do? What technology solution or what process am I going to put in place? What time am I going to set aside at the beginning of my day to be able to sit down and organize the day into a number of minuscule tasks that I can knock out and get a bunch of stuff done during the day? What am I going to do before we move forward? Because that's required of you to improve. And you need to sit there in silence until you're able to answer that question to say, here's what I'm going to do and here's when I'm going to implement it. And then you need to do it before moving forward, because there are times in any business situation where you're talking with a client, when you're talking with one of your engineers, when you're talking with yourself from time to time, to say what needs to occur, what needs to change for us to be able to move forward and create progress. And you need to sit there in silence until that question is answered, either by your client, either by your engineer, or by yourself, or whomever it is you're dealing with. And when you're talking about asking a customer for the business, you need to be comfortable with not being liked for a few seconds to say, am I going to benefit you? Yes. Am I going to help you? Yes. Do you want this thing? Yes. will you give me the business? Will you buy from me today? That is a tough question that needs to be asked by every salesperson or every sales process. If you're doing online sales or things like that, that is a tough question that you need to ask, and then sit there in silence and don't give them anything else until they answer it. Because the same awkward, uncomfortable silence that you're feeling, they're feeling it on the other side as well. And they will, rather than make an awkward silence even more awkward to say no, oftentimes that tough question will lead to a yes, because they want to relieve the pressure just as much as you do. Okay, so today's episode is all about looking at ourselves and figuring out, what tough questions am I not asking of people to move things forward? Because maybe I want them to like me, or maybe I'm uncomfortable with the silence, or maybe I'm not ready to create that wedge of stopping a hiccup in the process that really does push things forward to get some progress out of the situation. What am I not asking? What tough questions can I ask that will then push the process forward? Because at some point, you're going to have to ask for the money. You're going to have to ask for the contract. You're going to have to ask for whatever it is that you need to create a beneficial relationship for the person that you're delivering value to, so that you can get your benefit in return. And you're going to have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable in asking that question. So look within to say, am I really asking those tough questions? And if not, how do I get over asking those tough questions and getting us to a point where we're moving forward and creating progress? Because that and the results that this discipline offers is going to be what creates greater positivity, creativity, productivity, and profitability for you in whatever business that you're in. Okay, so I hope that little story helps you a little bit, opens a window for you, brings in some fresh air, turns a light on, whatever. Think about it, implement it, utilize it. I love you guys. I'll talk to you next week. Peace.